What if I told you that half of all tech leaders expect most of their AI deployments to be autonomous within the next 2 years? I think it's no longer a case if agentic AI will reshape business, and much more of a question of how fast and how far will it go? Well, in today's episode, I'm joined by Ken Englund, partner at EY, and he helps steer some of the world's fastest growing tech companies through exactly these kind of transitions that I'm talking about. And today we're going to unpack EY's latest technology pulse poll, which is essentially a deep dive into where 500 plus tech execs, where they really stand on AI investment, workforce changes, data risks, and the not so small matter of trust in autonomous systems. But what surprised me in our conversation today is it wasn't just about the numbers. It was actually about optimism. Yeah, AI spending is rising. Yes, autonomous agents are going mainstream. But layoffs? AI replacing people? That's way down. The real story here is about reinvention of roles, workflows, and even entire business models. So if you're wondering whether the hype around AI is turning into something very real, very tangible, that delivers return on investment, or what it means for your team, your strategy, and your budget, trust me, this one is worth your time. But enough from me. Let's get into it now as I officially introduce you to today's guest. So thank you for joining me on the podcast today. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, certainly, Neil. So I'm Ken Englund. I'm a partner at EY. I focus on what we call our high-tech growth segment. So if you think about companies that are mid-stage, late-stage private, newly IPO'd or public kind of hyper-growth companies, that's where I spend my time consulting and advising to them and sort of bringing all the services that EY has in the firm to that group of high-tech companies.
And it was a while ago I spoke with James, who I know you're well acquainted with. But one of the things that put you back on my tech radar and set off those tech spidey sensors was when I came across the EY Technology Pulse poll. So for anyone that's not heard about this, can you just set the scene, tell them what this is all about? And also, what was the goal behind this survey and who exactly was surveyed?
Yeah, so we conduct a pulse poll with tech executives at least a couple times a year. This is our fifth survey, so we've been doing it about 3 years. And originally it was to look at major issues and interests across high tech. But as you would imagine, Neil, over the last 2.5 years, it's all been about AI. Yeah. So we sort of shape our pulse polls that way. Specifically, this was to focus really around AI agents, autonomous deployments in that space. So, last year we spent a lot of time around large language models and those sort of items. So this was really to look at that space. And then it's a meaningful sample. We survey 500 tech executives in companies that have at least 5,000 employees, right? So we want to sort of get mid and large size tech companies to really get that feel of what's going on.
And a quick scan through the report revealed that nearly half of all tech leaders all reported that they're already adopting or fully deploying agentic AI. Maybe not too much of a surprise. It's all we've been hearing about in 2025. But from your viewpoint, what does it tell us about where we are right now in that AI adoption curve?
So I think a couple things jump out at me, Neil. First, I'm not surprised of the progress. I think a couple things did jump out. One is that, about half the respondents said they expect to have, at least half of their deployments fully autonomous in the next 24 months. So I think we all realize we're sort of at the tip of that activity, going from pilots to scale production. But almost half of them have deployed autonomous agents already, right? So I think that's a big piece. I think what also kind of underlines it for me is there's just a general feeling of optimism in terms of the activities and potential for AI. And that's not unique to tech, but we certainly view them as a leading sort of indicator of what maybe some other industries will do from that perspective. So, it's really get into full production pilots, even on a small scale, that we're seeing those trends.
And I think the last few years have felt like somewhat of an AI gold rush, with everyone rushing in to stake their claim in this space. And looking at the report, it revealed that I think it was 58% of executives believe that their organization is actually ahead of competitors in AI investment, which was slightly surprising for me. So what's driving that high level of confidence, and is it justified?
I think there's a little bit of both, and I think you have to look at it sort of critically.
Yep.
So, first of all, one of the things that I think about, Neil, is sort of there's a little bit of irony in the whole discussion because, numerically, 58% of people could be above average, right?
Yeah.
I always use the analogy of not everybody's an above average driver, right? So I think people believe they're further down the path maybe than they are and
Yeah.
what they assume from sort of their fellow travelers. But what I would say is, the low-hanging fruit is really what's being worked on these days. So, it's not surprising that there's been a reasonable amount of success. But, I think the hill gets steeper as the climb goes. One of the things I will say that's super important, and maybe some of the optimism is a lot of these leaders have gone to their bosses and asked for quite a bit of capital. So there is a little bit of internal pressure to show progress and results around ROI. And then what I would say is what we often advise is make sure you're really testing those progresses and maybe looking externally to see really how far along you are in the race.
And no matter how long or how far ahead they are in that race, 92% of tech leaders are expecting to increase their AI spending over the next year into 2026. So where do you see that investment going specifically? Is it agentic AI, or are there other areas of AI that's getting attention right now?
Yeah, so Neil, I think a couple things first. That 92% is about a 10% increase year to year because we asked the same question, this time last year. So some of that actually is probably coming out of other digital budgets as well. I think a couple things for me that are interesting around the investment, it's definitely shifting to agents, autonomous agents fully or partially, maybe a good amount away from last year's investments around large language models and, people building models, training models, tuning models. We clearly are seeing much more an adoption of sort of commercial models in place, very broadly, a lot of RAG adoption to handle that. So we think some of this is sort of moving from basic research into much more applied around agents from that perspective. I think the other piece, and maybe the willingness to drive some funding here, is interesting. That what we've seen is that most people around their AI investments are doing it to remain competitive. Number two is really to provide a better customer experience. And then maybe thirdly is just to be aligned with their overall strategy. So what I would say is while it's still early days, the idea of AI and these agentic agents being aligned to overall corporate strategy is pretty good.
And of course, there's a lot of doom and gloom in our news feeds at the moment, a lot of scary stories about job layoffs and AI replacing job roles, or enterprises laying people off so they can afford to invest even more in AI. That's the kind of narrative that we've seen and gotten familiar with. But despite some of those concerns, I think it was incredibly refreshing to read in your survey that only 9%, I'll say that again, 9% of respondents actually anticipate any layoffs in the next 6 months. So what do you think that signals about how companies are approaching workforce transformation? Any big takeaways that you uncovered here?
Yeah, I think there's two pieces. I think people are starting to understand how sort of AI and humans will work around particular workflows, number one. Two is I think that really we're continuing to work on chipping on existing workflows. And really when I talk to clients, a huge piece of what we're really trying to start to break through in the discussion is, what about entirely new workflows or addressing entirely new customer segments because of AI will be a big item. And then maybe what didn't pop out in the major headline is the respondents at 9% driving anticipated layoffs is down from 20% last year. So I think last year the mindset was AI was going to just take over X, Y, and Z activities for these people. And I think what we're really seeing is much more a blending of both human and sort of automation to go drive a workflow.
And one of the things that was quite intriguing was I saw in the report that I think it was 70% of leaders are focusing on upskilling existing staff, ensuring no one gets left behind and upskilling them so they can take on new roles, etc. While 68% are prioritise hiring new AI skilled talent. So from what you're seeing here, how are organisations balancing maybe both of those strategies? And is one proving more effective, or is that balance crucial?
Yeah, I think the balance is crucial. And if you look at the percentages, they're pretty close and they're pretty similar to what we were talking about last year. Last year, just giving a little bit more of the novelty of things, there was a little more external, just giving velocity and speed. But overall, we see a need to really have internal context to go and current business understanding and data to really go drive this. But also we're seeing a need for external hiring, particular areas, a lot around AI experienced product managers, AI experienced data engineers, what maybe I'd call ML ops, and then really kind of an emerging discussion around forward deployed engineers. So some of these skills don't exist in some of these companies, hence external acquisition of talent. But in general, we're seeing a nice balance between building new skills with the current workforce and then bringing in supplementary skills.
And another stat that I'll pull from that report is I think it was half of executives surveyed expect more than 50% of their AI deployments to actually be autonomous within the next 2 years. Would you see that shift meaning for things like governance, trust, and operational oversight from those IT perspectives? Anything you can share around that and where we're heading?
Yeah, Neil, I think a few light bulbs have gone on. So if I go back about a year ago when we were talking to companies really deploying AI in high tech, very few of them wanted to talk to us about responsible AI. They have trust and safety teams that are very focused on model quality and performance and all that sort of stuff. What we're seeing now with more autonomous deployment of agents across an enterprise, sort of the rest of the company, whether you're an audit committee or you're the CFO or you're head of internal audit, now really have a significant amount of concern around governance, trust, and sort of operational oversight. I think the other piece that's gone on for us is that these companies know they need to build that sort of layer and governance framework, but they also don't want to sacrifice speed. What's interesting is I was just talking to a client yesterday. They have over 1,000 AI use cases in their funnel. Now, they haven't all made it through ideation and all that sort of stuff, but this is something that will need to be automated, will need to be streamlined, because we can't have all the governance really being the gating factor to getting this innovation, whether it's productivity, top line growth for AI. So a lot of attention by companies just kind of emerging now around this whole space that maybe wasn't there a year ago.
And as optimism around AI inevitably continues to rise, what would you say are some of the risks that leaders listening could be underestimating right now, and how should they be planning for them? I would imagine security would be a top concern as AI adoption increases, especially with things like agentic AI, and we're unleashing swarms and swarms of agents out there with some maybe not thinking about security. But I'm curious, what are you seeing here?
Yeah. So, Neil, I think a couple things. First, I mean, a lot of these companies are actually thinking about this. And what's interesting is 3/4 of the companies we responded have either a privacy, security, governance frameworks in place around AI. But nearly half of these companies, data privacy, security risk are their highest concern. Almost half of them from a year ago have increased. Last year, if we asked the same question about what are your risks and concerns, a lot of it was around observability, model performance, and all that. And as you think about fast forward a year, a lot more comfort on sort of how these models work, a little less concern around hallucinations, et cetera, chain of reasoning in place. So back to the top of the list are these things around data privacy and security. And I think that ties in very nicely for some of the discussions about audit committees, CFOs, and everybody wanting to make sure we're in that space. So, that's gone up almost 20 points from last year. So I think everybody gets a concern now that we're seeing sort of, I'll just call it actionable AI, right? Agents, whether semi-autonomous or fully autonomous, really being right in the crosshairs of these companies.
And you've seen a few of these reports over the years. You know, the hype around AI arguably feels slightly similar to the conversations around cloud and mobile many years ago. But I'm curious, from your personal opinion, was there anything that surprised you in there, or anything that excites you about where this is heading?
Yeah, I think really the pace of adoption. I mean, you can look at any of these S curves. It's really astounding, right, Neil? I think the other piece is just really how willing these organizations are to experiment and try, right? So back to my example of a company, a reasonably large tech company having 1,000 AI use cases, right? If you think about that in terms of magnitude, how you process it, how do you evaluate, and how you drive consistent ROI as these capital investments are going to look for returns, all that framework is kind of being built. I described it as sort of building a plane while you're trying to fly it. That's a little bit of where we are in this activity. But I think sort of early results are showing pretty good returns.
And that's such an important point, because there's been a lot of conversations around ROI on these AI projects. There's also a lot of low-hanging fruit that we're starting to see being secured there. And of course, over the next 12 months, we're going into 2026. There's been a lot of talk around AI projects stuck in pilot phase. Are you seeing many come straight out of pilot phase? Are we overcoming that as well? What are you seeing here from the conversations you're having with clients?
Yeah, I think a couple of things that came out of the survey, Neil, that I think are useful. There were probably about 40% of the pilots that didn't go forward, and two main reasons. One, clearly ROI, and then two was data issues, data dependency, data needs, and that sort of stuff. Internal data, external data. So I think for the latter group, that group is getting reprocessed again, right? As the data is available, those things will continue. So I don't think these are unique, right, to AI. I mean, we struggle with these around a lot of digital transformation programs, but I think that's a really key piece of the equation, right, that will be there. I think the other piece, Neil, I mentioned earlier, we're only in kind of round one in terms of really the art of the possible of what these models and agents will do. As I said, we are sort of automating the existing workflows, but really the opportunity at hand is going to be all new workflows. Like an example I would use, we're talking to clients that if we could change the entire sales motion for a software company, would they go down market, right? If, for example, if you were a hardware OEM and you could automate that whole sales service support model, would you need a distributor or a VAR, right? Like these are things that over the next few years, as these workflows get better and more automated, there will be whole new business opportunities to go forward. So we're really chipping away at the easy stuff right now, which is great, right? Crawl, walk, run, but a lot more to come. And I think we'll see that over the next 12 to 18 months.
100% with you. And I think we'll have to get you back on in the next 12 to 18 months and see just how far things have improved. But thank you so much for bringing the Technology Pulse report to life today. But before I let you go, I'm going to ask you to leave one final gift for everyone listening. We have an Amazon wish list. Is there a book that you'd like to add to that wish list that people listening might be able to check out and learn even more after listening to our conversation today? What would that book be and why?
Yeah, Neil, I'm not sure I could just give you one, so I'll go quick. But I mean, for me, probably the most seminal book that I can think of is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Really a foundational book around sort of behavioral decision making, right? Really that I always say, like, if you can read one book that will, cover 30 books, that would be the book. I think from a business perspective. I think from a personal perspective, I always recommend Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. If you want to learn a little about stoicism, really critical. And then on the AI front, I just finished Empire AI by Karen Howe, which really details a lot about OpenAI, but just the overall AI business. There are a lot of externalities, second order effects to AI, and it's really an interesting read. So maybe those three, Neil, I'd put out there for your listeners.
Love it. Well, I will get all three added to the Amazon wish list. And for people listening, if they want to find out more information about that Technology Pulse poll that we've mentioned today, or just keep up to speed with new information as it lands throughout the year, where's the best place for people listening to find out more information? Anywhere in particular you'd point everyone?
Yeah, the best place, really simple, at our website, www.ey.com/TMT, is Tech Media Telco.
And I would urge everyone listening to check out that poll. I will also link to it as well to make it easy for people. And so many big stats in there and a lot of information around the agentic AI shifts and how it's gone from experimental to essential this year, and how the workplace impact has largely remained mixed, but security is also becoming a top concern. But there is so much optimism in this space, so much to be excited about, and it's not all doom and gloom. I really want to hammer home that point, because I think there's too many negative stories in our news feeds, and hopefully we've been able to restore the balance a little bit today. But thank you for bringing this report to life. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Have a great day.
So where does that leave us? After speaking with Ken today, I think one thing's clear. AI isn't just transforming how companies operate. It's actually reshaping how leaders actually think about growth, competition, and indeed talent itself. And what I appreciated most about this conversation is it wasn't just about the stats. And don't get me wrong, there were some pretty eye-opening stats in that report. But for me, today's conversation was more about Ken's perspective, especially around how we're not just automating tasks, we're actually building entirely new workflows, and even questioning the very structure of go-to-market strategies, and doing it in real time with governance frameworks being built almost as we fly the plane. So, if you took one thing from today's episode, I hope it's that the AI future isn't inevitable. It's being shaped right now by the people deciding where to invest, where to slow down and adopt a more cautious approach, and where to be bold. But what do you think? Are you and your organisation ready for agentic AI? Or are we still way too early in the curve to commit too much at this stage? If you're brave enough, please, I invite you to let me know your thoughts. Let's keep this conversation going. LinkedIn at Neil C. Hughes, X, Instagram, just at Neil C. Hughes too. The website is techtalksnetwork.com. You'll find 8 podcasts, 3,500 podcast interviews, and a few other things to keep you busy too. So check that out, and also check out that Technology Pulse poll that was released by EY. Most importantly, feedback. You've heard from me, you've heard from today's guest. This is your call to action. Let me know your thoughts. This is a dialogue, not a monologue. That's why I record this every day. But on that note, I've taken up too much of your time. You're probably on the commute to the office or walking your dog or doing chores of some sort. So get back to it, and we'll meet back here tomorrow. Speak with you all then. Bye for now.